Say when. I'm really glad Reese chose 159. I was already going to tell you to do 159 for the Lord's Supper, but we were just in tune. It just happens, right? I want to read it really quick. I know we all just sang it, but it's a good song. 159, I gave my life for thee. My precious blood I shed, that thou might ransom be, and quickened, revived from the dead. My Father's house of light, my glory-circled throne, I left for earthly night, for wanderings sad and lone. I suffered much for thee, more than thy tongue can tell, of bitterest agony, to rescue thee from hell. And I have brought to thee down from my home above, salvation full and free, my pardon and my love. I gave, I left, I bore, I bring to you. What have you given, left, borne, or brought to me? It's a song about sacrifice. So keep that in mind as we are moving on into today's lesson. As was mentioned in the Lord's Supper with Micah, it's coming to that first time of the year, that part of the year where everyone's ready to do their, whatever it's called, New Year's resolution, right? And I know you all are because I've been hearing you. No, this is the last loaf of bread I'm going to eat. This bag of popcorn, this is the one. This one. No more fudge. I know, I heard you all, so I know we're coming up on it. But this information today, I hope, is not like most resolutions that we just kind of, yeah, and then you're eating fudge, in 2 minutes. I hope that we all, including myself, will give heed, open our ears to these qualities that we're going to be learning about that a Christian must have to fight the good fight and realize that we are just traveling pilgrims here. We need to have these things. This isn't our home, but we need these qualities that we're going to be talking about. We need to make these our own as we're just traveling through. So Mike is already touching on it today, but we will be continuing to go over our studies in leadership today. In our previous lessons, we've been going over how each Christian, every person here, is a leader. And what is a leader? It's just an influencer. Just an influencer. We are influencers. That's what a leader is. And if you are an influencer for God, you are a very important, powerful person. And you need to see yourself as that. If you are being used for God in this way to be an influencer, you need to realize that you are important and you are powerful to sway people with your actions, to influence them. But with that comes great responsibility of choosing how you're going to use that influence, good or bad, right? So then the next lesson was about integrity. We must have integrity as influencers, as leaders. We have to have integrity, and that being standing up for good no matter what the cost. But as we are moving further into this study of leadership that we all are, whether you like it or not, we need to understand how deep our leadership role goes. How much is required from our lives as leaders? Being Christians, being these leaders, being these influencers, we must change. Now, I know we all know about the John 3 change that we've been going over. Yes, we need to be a new creature, have the new birth. Make that confession, the great confession. But is that where it ends? Rhetorical? No, that is not where it ends. We confess, we repent, we get wet. Is that where it ends? No, we know this. But what else needs to change? What we are going to be talking about is our attitudes today. But our attitudes towards what? No. Our attitudes towards who? First and foremost, it starts with us. Us right here, in our minds. Our attitudes. We need to change our attitudes towards how we look at ourselves. How are we looking at ourselves as we are in this world? How do we see ourselves? How do we see ourselves in regards to our relationships with our wives, with our husbands, with our children, the rest of our church family? How do we see ourselves? What's our role? What's our attitude towards these people? If we cannot change our attitude, then the organization will suffer. Now, as Mike was saying, in the business realm, that is exactly what was going on with Henry Ford. If you cannot change, the organization is going to suffer. He proved that. Henry Ford proved it. Mike proved it by reading about Henry Ford. If you will not change, the organization will suffer. If we won't change, the organization that we are a part of will suffer, and that being the church. That's why this is so important. This resolution has to be kept up with. The world, our coworkers, our family, our friends who are out there in the world, these lost people, if our attitudes are bad, then how can we expect the world to want to come in the door? And not only that door, but just come around us at all. So what needs to change about our attitude? Now, I asked you before the lesson to name a person. I give you those little cards. Name a person, living or dead, that you know, that you greatly admire. And under that, write the reason why you greatly admire these people. Then I also asked you to take a moment to list the negative attitudes, the bad habits that you possess, that you know about, that are influencing people right now. Not right now, but as we are living in life. What things do you know about yourself that, okay, these are some bad habits, these are some negative attitudes that I possess that are influencing people right now? Because we all have bad attitudes. We all have bad attitudes that are negatively affecting people around us at all times. Or at least we need to be focused on who we are so that we can watch out for these things popping up at the wrong time. And we need to change those things. If we do not change our attitudes, what makes us different than the world? The people in the world hate their lives. They have no hope. And we know this because, as Reese is always bringing up, we're working around these people all the time at the construction sites. They hate their lives. They have no hope in life. There's nothing to look forward to. And with people we used to go to dinner with, that's all they want to do is complain and complain and complain. This person is just like complain about life. They're unhappy. But we are the most blessed people, or we should be the most blessed people on earth with the most hope. But yet, if we still have these bad attitudes, how does that make any sense? If we have these same bad attitudes that the world has, how does that make any sense? In the leadership book, Maxwell writes, an advisor to President Lincoln suggested a certain candidate for the Lincoln cabinet, but Lincoln refused, saying, "I don't like the man's face." "But sir," insisted the advisor, "he can't be responsible for his face." Lincoln replied, "Every man over 40 is responsible for his face," and the subject was dropped. No matter what you think about your attitude, it shows on your face. Why so serious? Today, I'm wanting to know, how is your attitude? Do you just go to the line that you're supposed to go to? Do you ever go above and beyond? Do you do nice things or the right things because, well, it's the right thing to do? Or do you do it because you want to help take the load off somebody when you do these things? Do you do the right thing because certain people are watching you? Oh, this person came over. Oh, this person's in town. Now look at me. I help people. Or do you do it because the task at hand needs to be done to help the person that it affects? A while back, I did a sermon about all of us being in a raft, right? Going down the river. And how we're all in this rowboat together. And when someone wasn't rowing, we could physically feel that. You remember going down the river when someone wasn't rowing right? Oh, this doesn't feel right. Now, the same thing happens with us here as we are working and living together in our home life and our church life. The question is, are you rowing or are you just coasting? We've all had siblings. Are you the one that sneaks away when cleanup time is happening? Or are you the one that stays and helps? Because just like in the rowboat, we can feel when you're not there helping. Now, don't get stuck on that dishes thing, because it can be put to everything. The question we must all ask is, am I changing for the better, or am I starting to plateau? Same thing leaders in business have to, am I just staying here because I don't want to move? This is the perfect car and we're not going to change it, not even the color. Or are we willing to expand our minds? Now, that doesn't mean change the gospel or change the doctrine. I'm not talking about any of that stuff today. We are not becoming charismatic today. We're changing ourselves. Are we starting to plateau? Are we starting to stay stagnant to where we're building algae? In the leadership book, one of the headlines he has is, "It is improbable, it is very unlikely that a person with a bad attitude can continuously be a success." It's very unlikely that a person with a bad attitude can continuously be a success. If all we are doing all the time is having a bad attitude, we cannot be a success, and the organization, the church, cannot succeed. Now, this attitude can be beaten. If we have allowed ourselves to get stuck in a rut, we can get out of it. But we must change the way we are looking at ourselves and the world around us. Maxwell goes on to say, a man walked by a tattoo shop in Hong Kong and saw as an option for a tattoo the saying, "Born to lose." The man went inside to investigate if people actually get that horrible saying permanently put on their bodies. And the Hong Kong man replied, "Yes, sometimes." The man went on to say, "I just can't believe that." And the Hong Kong man replied in broken English, "Before tattoo put on body, tattoo on mind." Now, the point of this is our attitudes. Once our minds are tattooed with negative thinking, our chances for long-term success diminish. If we are always thinking, well, I can't do that. It's not me. Well, if they're not going to do it, I'm not going to do it. Blah, blah, blah. If we let those things creep in and we tattoo that, then we are not going to move. We're going to stay stagnant. So as we begin to change our thinking, we need to immediately change our behavior. Begin to act the part of the person that you would like to become. Take action on the behavior you admire by making it your behavior. Fake it till you make it. Too many people want to feel, then take action. This never works. When I feel like working out, then I'll work out. That never works. Okay, I'll start Monday. I'll start at the beginning of the month, the beginning of the year. Hey, guess what? That's all happening tomorrow. We wait for that beautiful sunny day to decide, okay, now I'll clean out the garage. Oh, wait, now it's hot. Wait, I'll get up early and do it. Oh, now it's too cold. We all do it. But with our attitudes, we can't let that thing sink in. We need to make the decision now to want to change so that the organization does not suffer. If we change our attitude, this is important. If we change our attitude, we can change the world. But we need to remember this is a lifelong project. It's not going to just snap. We just need to work on it. We need to start faking it till we make it. Okay, I'm going to start doing this. I may not want to do it right now, but I need to just start. Okay, I'm going to put the smile on my face. I'm going to try and do this. The pessimist sits and complains about the wind. The optimist sits and expects it to change. The leader adjusts the sails so we can keep moving forward. Do we understand how deep this goes? Or do we only go as far as required of us? Do we just tiptoe that line and refuse to go above and beyond? We cannot remain, stop. We cannot become what we need to be by remaining who we are. We cannot become what we need to be by remaining who we are. A good leader does not plateau, but keeps growing and changing to better themselves and the organization they are a part of. A bad leader, a bad Christian, has an unwillingness to change, and that will lead to trouble for the organization. If we refuse, if we are unwilling to change, the church will suffer. Notice how I keep stressing the church will suffer. The church will suffer. We're working for someone. We make the church look, if we look bad, the church looks bad. I almost titled this sermon Attitude Adjustment, but really, it's an attitude decision. It's not the circumstances around us that make us better, it's rather our attitudes. We choose, we decide our attitudes. And if we choose not to change, the church will suffer. All that to get into the real meat of our discussion. We're not even halfway there. Leaders must change, but change what? Our attitudes. How far does it go? Shall I describe it to you? Let's go to the Bible and get some inspiration. Micah, darling, can you open up 4 Bibles? I'm going to let you guys read this, do a little test so I can drink some water. Let's go to the Bible, get some inspiration. First one, Philippians 1:1. James 1:1. 2 Peter 1:1. And Jude 1:1. And just for your notes, Titus says the same thing. 1:1. Take a look. Look at it. See if you notice any similarities between these verses. Do you notice a pattern? Every one of these followers of Christ describe themselves in a certain way. Did you notice it? Did you catch it? A servant of God or a servant of Jesus Christ. So that's it. That's not it. We're not even there yet. We're talking about changing our attitudes. What do our attitudes need to change into? Our attitudes need to change into a servant of God. But do we understand what a servant is and what a servant looks like? That's our next point. What is a servant? Does a servant look like? Now, don't we call ourselves servants? I know we do because I heard him pray about it today. I heard him say it during Bible class, and I heard him pray about it during Lord's Supper. We are servants of God. We say it all the time. Do we understand what that word means, especially right here? Have you ever looked into the Greek? The Greek word for this right here, servant, is doulos, which is where we get the word doula. What is a doula? A person trained to provide advice, information, emotional support, and physical comfort to a mother before, during, and just after childbirth. As most of you know, my wife gave birth to Edmond Dantes 7-8 weeks ago. So my wife and I have been able to we've been able to see in close proximity, right up close and personal, our midwives perform these very things and understand what a doula is. But now compared to the hospital, which unfortunately we ended up in with all 3 of our boys, despite going through midwives, the hospital is a great contrast to the office of a midwife doula. What do I mean? I'm talking about that. Do I just tiptoe over the line, or do I go above and beyond? The hospital, all right, I'll keep you alive, but I don't really care about you. The hospital is a business, and they treat you like a business. Now, not all the nurses, some of the nurses care about you. But the system that is the hospital, in contrast to a doula, night and day. A doula or a midwife, who is a very personal, and as described earlier, they are there for advice, emotional support, and physical comfort before, during, and after childbirth. Watching this 8 weeks ago was a very humbling thing to experience. Our midwives, Heather and Carrie, were very supportive, caring, and comforting. All the way through the pregnancy, the midwives are taking care of any physical and emotional needs that arise, but once Bryn went into labor and the contractions started, the way that the midwives snap into action is an amazing thing. Be there and watch. As Bryn is in pain, all that is on the mind of Heather and Carrie is Bryn's needs, the baby's needs. Whether that's applying pressure to relieve as much stress off of Bryn's body as she's contracting, or making sure that she's staying hydrated, or trying to get the baby out of breech position. They're right there, not thinking about themselves, but the task at hand. It's the same way when the baby comes out, making sure that Bryn is tended to, making sure that she's hydrated, she's eating to regain her strength, making sure she's resting so she doesn't hemorrhage. They helped her get to the bathroom, as weak as she was, making sure she had the supplies she needed to heal herself or heal her wounds. They made sure that the baby was able to eat so that baby's okay, able to eat, and there's no pain for the mother. You. Watching this in action live right before my eyes and remembering the way that the disciples of Christ described themselves gave me so much inspiration to be better. I could not wait to present this lesson to you. I was sitting there watching Carrie. I just went through Titus, which is funny because I didn't pick that one, but the way that they're describing themselves, I am a servant, I am a doulos. I could not wait to get here and talk to you guys about all of us needing to be this way. Now, don't get me wrong. The word doulos is not Paul calling himself a female baby catcher, but the word is very closely related to the word doula. In fact, most of the articles that I found about women who were doulas all started their blogs with the meaning of the word doula and how it originated from Greek word, whether that's this one or a female version of the Greek of the this and that. I don't understand Greek, but they all originated it back to a Greek word. The point of all this, do we think of ourselves in every aspect of our lives that we are servants? Every aspect of our lives. Do we think of ourselves in that way? I know I didn't. It wasn't until Micah came to town and he said something like that. I was like, dude, that is how we think we should be thinking about ourselves. Totally shook my world. Yes, we know about the Great Commission, Matthew 28, and that we're supposed to preach the gospel to all the nations, Mark 16. But being a servant is not just about giving the gospel. Hey, Jesus, all right. It's about putting others' needs before yours. We can go back to 1 if you want. 1 Corinthians 9:19. For though I be free from all men, yet I have made myself servant unto all, that I may gain the more. If you will not, remember, attitude, decision, if you will not practice servanthood in your lives, then you won't practice it with your family or at your home life, and then you won't practice it with your brethren, church life, and then how can we be expected to change the world? If we're not going to do it within ourselves, how are we going to do it? How can we be, if I'm not going to be a servant to my wife, how can you believe that I'm going to serve you? And then if I'm not even going to serve any of you, how can the world look at us and say, yeah, they're different. They actually care about me. They won't. It starts here. Decision, attitude, servant, doulos. These women who cared so much for the well-being of Bryn and our baby are not Christians, but understand very well the concept of serving. Are we going to let non-Christians, the world, outdo us? So I ask again, what is a servant? What does it mean to serve? Let's look at the Greek. If we want to go back to any one of them, James 1, Titus 1, any of the ones. Look at the Greek for servant, 1401, it's doulos. From 1210, a slave, literal or figurative, involuntary or voluntary, frequently, therefore, in a qualified sense of subjection or subservience, bondman or servant. I could do it earlier and then Subserviency. Whew. Basically, summed up, it's, you know, how it says figurative, involuntary, or voluntary. This is a voluntary thing because God doesn't make anybody do anything. So sum this up. A servant is a person that voluntarily submits themselves to the needs of others. The needs of God, which is serving others. So, what is a servant? Or how do we apply this today? How do we do this? Do we all need to start delivering babies? Do we need to go get our midwifery license, get a catcher's mitt? Is that what we're talking about? Is the midwife the only way to serve others? No. What does a servant look like in our everyday lives? I know that we've killed the dead horse and unburied it and beat it again, but it's about our attitude. And it's about actually caring about others and being willing to serve them and care about their needs. It's not enough to fake it till you make it for the rest of our lives. Eventually, we have to make it our lives. We have to get to the point where we want to serve others. Our attitudes towards others is our choice. But what does that need to look like? Well, let's go to the greatest example there ever was. This is where I'm getting ahead of you. John 13. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm skipping ahead, just so you know Jesus dies. John 13. We will be starting in verse 12. But as we all know, Jesus, the Son of God, washed 24 dirty feet. God came in human form and washed dirty feet. Now, we all know this. I know we know this. It's talked about by a lot of people. And it shouldn't lose its flavor or its importance. But I know that we know that God came in a human form and washed feet, but there's a deeper situation happening here. It was the Jewish custom that whoever was hosting a feast would be the one to wash the guests' feet or have one of their servants do it. But much like we talked earlier with siblings and dishes, the apostles didn't take on this role. Nobody took on the role. So Jesus took it on. So this is what normally people would do. Nobody did that. But Jesus took it on. Because as we all know, he brought it up this morning. Keep calling you he, you have a name. Micah brought it up this morning. And we talked about it in our Matthew class. They are arguing, they are fighting about who is the greatest clear up to and during this feast. In the first instance, Jesus, I'm just having a hard time. This was happening to me earlier. I need to get this hairball out. In the first instance, Jesus pulls out a child and says, "Become like this child." But they obviously didn't listen because Jesus performs this act of great love, humility, and kindness. Jesus, being the greatest person in the world, yet alone in the room, set all that aside to serve his brethren, even the person he knew would betray him. He even washed Judas's feet. So what does our attitude need to look like? Jesus set his title, his greatness aside, and got down and acted like a servant, or became a servant. Didn't act. He became a servant. So, John chapter 13, verse 12. What does our attitude need to look like? So after he had washed their feet, and had taken his garments, and was set down again, he said unto them, Know ye what I have done to you? You call me Master, you call me Lord. And ye say, Well, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and Master, have washed your feet, ye also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example, that you should do as I have done to you. Verily, verily, I say unto you, the servant is not greater than his Lord, neither is he that is sent greater than he that sent him. If ye know these things, happy are ye if you do them. Go on down to verse 34, a very well-known verse. A new commandment I give unto you, that ye love one another as I have loved you. That ye have love for one another. By this shall all men know that ye are my disciples, if ye have love for one another. If the greatest man is in the same room as you, are you greater than him? He? No. But if you do what he does, you can be great. What did Jesus do? He served when no one else would, setting aside his wants, his needs, his greatness, his title. He loved them and proved that by taking action and changing his attitude. He didn't need to change his attitude. He always had this attitude, but showing them this is what you must do. If the leader's going to do this and you're going to follow the leader, you need to do this. If I can do it, you can do it. And then he goes even to the cross. So if we're looking to this perfect example, giving yourself your whole life, if I can do this for those that I love, you can do this. That is what a servant is doing. Luke chapter 10, don't need to go there, that's where it's at. The Good Samaritan. We all know that story. It's a very well-known story. The Samaritan who was considered a dog to the Jews, and the Samaritans didn't care much for the Jews either. But, however, this Samaritan saw that this man was in great need and set himself and their differences aside in order to help him. He had compassion toward him. He tended to him. He got him a place to stay and then paid for it. Paid for his current needs and the ones to come. He served him even though he was not obligated to. Because he had the good attitude. Because he had a good attitude, he did it anyways. Or Ruth, which you can find in the book of Ruth. 4 chapters long. Good read. Instead of going back to her native land, the country where she was born, playing it safe and going back to where her parents were, she decided to stay with her mother-in-law, Naomi. She chose to stay with her, not only stay with her, but get a job to provide and feed for her, overall taking care of her. Setting aside her needs to take care of Naomi, who had no one else. She lost everything. She lost her husbands, she lost her sons. And Ruth stayed there to take care of her, feed her, get a job, take care of her. And also, wrapping up the story, she gave her grandchildren, so that also, we're doing our part, so. Setting aside her own needs to take care of someone who had a greater need. Matthew chapter 25, we can go here. Verse 35. For I was hungered, and ye gave me meat. I was thirsty, and ye gave me drink. I was a stranger, and ye took me in. Naked, and ye clothed me. I was sick, and ye visited me. I was in prison, and ye came unto me. Then the righteous shall say, when did we do all these things? Go down to verse 40, and the king shall answer and say unto them, verily I say unto you, inasmuch as you have done this unto the least of these, my brethren, you have done it unto me. What just happened? You were hungry, we gave you meat, we gave you drink, we took you in when you were a stranger, we clothed you when you were naked, you were sick and we visited you, and when you were in prison, we came into you. Taking action and setting yourself aside for others is what we just looked at. But how do we apply this now? Because not a lot of us are visiting prisons, people in prison, and coming into them. So we need to apply this verse. What does this look like in our everyday lives? It can be as easily as noticing other people's feelings. We need to be in tune with their emotions and their needs. So just like us, having kids, we are very in tune with our kids. We know when they're sick. We know when they're teething. We know when they're hungry. We know when they're tired. We know when they just need attention. And we work towards serving those needs. Some people just say, what do you mean? They're crying. Well, I can tell the difference between what's going on right now. And that needs to be what we have with our brethren. That's the same attitude we need to have towards our brethren. We need to welcome people into our home and feed them. Listen to them when they need to vent. Just being there. Being emotional support. Give attention to others. Be willing to drop things in your life to help with other people's needs. Galatians chapter 6, verse 2. Bear ye one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ. Hebrews chapter 13, verse 16. But to do good and to communicate, forget not, for with such sacrifices God is well pleased. Now, this word communicate is, you can look it up or pull it up for everyone. This word communicate is from 2:44. It means partnership, participation, social intercourse, or benefaction, communication, communion, contribution, distribution, or fellowship. So when it's saying to do good and to communicate, this is fellowship. This is participation, this is contribution, this is distribution, there's way more involved than just communicate. This is why it's important to do our word studies. But with this, are we again towing that line? All right, well, I'm here with you, aren't I? Yeah, but you're not communicating with me. You're not, fellowship is not just being in the same place as the other person. Fellowship is more than that. Sometimes it's just as easy as talking to someone, giving them a hug, just being there. Not thinking about what you have to do or get done, but be a friend and be there when they need it, remembering how you felt when you were in need. For example, this last week, my whole family got sick, and my mom, remembering how it felt to be sick and still have to take care of children and the household, lost us all week. She helped take care of the kids, and she helped take care of us and our kids and the household chores, setting aside her needs to take care of us. Right there before our eyes. There it is again. So shout out moment to Mom. But really, that's where it starts. It starts here. It starts in the mind. That's where we need to change it. It starts with us. It starts with our home life. Because if we aren't practicing this at home with our husbands and our wives and our children, then we're not going to practice it with our brethren. Then how can we serve the world? 1 Corinthians 10:24. Let no one seek his own, but each one the other's well-being. So here comes the scary part. Moving on to point 3. What does not serving others look like? 2 Timothy chapter 3, verse 2 through 4. For men shall be lovers of their own selves. Could just stop there. But it goes on. Covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, disobedient to parents, unthankful, unholy, without natural affection, truce breakers, false accusers, incontinent, which is lack of self-control, fierce, despisers of those that are good, traitors, heady, high-minded, lovers of pleasure more than the lovers of God. Why is this scary? Why is this next section scary? Because everything that we're going to talk about and everything we just read may look familiar. It may be on some of those cards that you guys wrote down. It may even be on one of my cards. So what does a servant not look like? Well, right off the bat, obviously, arguing over who is the greatest in front of God when he is about to be led off to be crucified and suffocate to death is not being a servant. Not much else more to say there. The apostles were not only considered with their wants and needs, they overlooked and ignored Jesus in his greatest hour of need. How about the Good Samaritan story? Well, first of all, robbing someone, beating them, and taking all of their possessions and leaving them for dead is not serving them. But then there's the priest and the Levite, who are supposed to be in the office of mediator between God and man, serving others. They didn't serve anyone but themselves, whether that was because they were thinking, oh, I'm too busy, I don't associate with them, or I'm better than them. Didn't matter. They crossed over to the other side of the road, and they were ultimately serving themselves and didn't want to be inconvenienced with this man's needs. Now, we all know about Jesus washing feet and the Good Samaritan story. That's such a well-known story. Even the heathen, the people of the world know, that's a Good Samaritan, right? They just use that, right? We all know this story. So that may compel us to go through the motions of doing good things. But does it go beyond that? Is our heart, our mind, our soul involved with this? Do we do nice things because the Lord requires me to do them? but in all reality, we don't actually care. It reminds me of the Incredibles movie when Mr. Incredible's boss isn't happy, Bob, and calls him into the office, and he's not happy because everyone that comes to the insurance company and goes through Mr. Incredible's office knows the inner workings of the company, and they're able to not get cheated by the company, but actually able to get help. And Mr. Incredible asks, "Are you saying we shouldn't help people?" And the boss replies, "The law requires that I say no." I thought we were supposed to help people. We're supposed to help our people. Is that how we are serving our family or our brethren? The law requires that I help you. Do we only go as far as we have to without ever going above and beyond? Are you serving and helping others because it's the right thing to do or because you want to, but is your heart not in it? Because people know. People know. Your family knows. Your brethren know when you are being genuine and when you're only doing it because the law requires you to. Do you serve at all? Or are you like that sibling that walks away when it's time to clean up? Do you walk away and hide when it's time to clean up? Well, everybody else is there, sitting there tidying up. And I only bring this up because we can all relate to this. But we don't need to get stuck there, even though we are in situations to where I know that we do dishes together. But it could come to anything. Evangelism. Well, why are we always out door knocking, but so-and-so's not here? It can be applied to everyone here, or every situation. There's a saying out there, happy wife, happy life. But that goes for everybody. Mama's happy, everyone's happy. Yes, but if everybody's happy, everybody's happy. Are you thinking about the other person in your family, persons in your church family? So, as I'm scrolling on my phone, it's very ironic. As I'm scrolling on my phone, I keep seeing this thing pop up, this common problem that keeps happening in all these videos. I don't know why this is in my feed, but it is. But this was not a problem 50 years ago, and it wasn't even a problem 15 years ago. But spouses are being neglected by their spouses because of their phones. Children are being neglected because of the parents' phones. You are more interested in this block in your hand than the person sitting right there next to you. But this goes with people other than your spouse. Your kids, your friends. You'd rather scroll mindlessly for hours than be present, connect, and encourage those most important to you. Which goes back to Hebrews 13. How can you communicate with people when you're not even willing to communicate with them, to fellowship them? There's a study out there going along with this that says when your phone is in your hand, that's why it's still there, when your phone is in your hand or when you set it on the table in front of you and everyone sees that, subconsciously, everyone knows that they're not the focus. When I'm just going to put this here, they know that you're waiting for something. Or when you have it in your hand, oh, yeah? Yeah? This is distracting. How can you meet others' needs if you aren't even willing to pay attention to those right there in front of you? Not only bring this up because it's in my feed. But it happens, and I notice that it happens because there I am, and the kids come up. Dad, 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 dad. Yes. Hi. Hi. But this wasn't a problem 15 years ago. I can remember way back that far. This wasn't a problem. But the servant, as a servant, you can't always play the victim. You can't always be the one who needs the attention. You can't always be the one who's in a bad mood all the time, taking advantage of the one that's serving. It's okay to have a bad day, but not every day can be a bad day, which goes back to the rafting sermon. Take the breather, but we're all here rafting. We all need a break. We all need to be rowing together, because if you are always the person who needs to be lifted up, then the other person never gets a break, and they never get the chance to be lifted up by you. And then everybody gets discouraged, and then no one's rowing, and then no one's going anywhere. Can you imagine if we were not rowing on that thing? So a servant is not someone who is constantly saying, woe is me, but they are the person who says, or they are not the person that says, well, if they're not going to do it, I'm not going to do it. Because if that's the case, then there would be no Good Samaritan story. Well, if the priest isn't going to do it, and the Levite's not going to do it, then I'm not going to do it. The end of story. But could somebody here be the priest and Levite? We have to bring this back to application. When we read these stories, these parables by Jesus, when we're talking about a better attitude, we need to bring it back to us. This focus needs to come back to us. I'm not just up here because I want to waste time. I want to better us for this, the rest of today, the rest of this year. Could some of us be that priest or Levite? Going back to the leadership book, Maxwell writes about he and his wife Margaret bought a house and took really good care of the front yard so that everyone driving by and looking in could see how green and luscious and kept up it had been. But then he points out how the backyard didn't look so good at all. His point being that sometimes people look like they're well put together on the outside, but their backyards, their attitudes are not kept up, cleaned up, or worked on at all. Are we, brethren, us, are we good here in our front yard on Sundays, on the broadcast? Are we kept up and looking good while our backyard, our deep down self is not kept up and we are just that Incredibles boss? The law requires that I help you. The law requires that I show up for worship. So moving on to the fourth point, serve each other, don't serve each other. What's the big deal? Why should we serve each other? What's the point? Not being a servant is not serving God. What do I mean? How is me not serving others not serving to God? James chapter 3, verse 16. For where envying and strife is, there is confusion in every evil work. As Micah has said before, we are the only Bible, we may be the only Bible that somebody ever opens up or sees. So if at times the world only gets to see a brief snapshot of us, what are they going to see? Are they going to see a loving person, a servant person, despite what may be going on in our personal life? We need to take that a step inward. What are our brethren seeing from each other? Are they always seeing someone who's willing to help and is kind? Or are they seeing someone who is selfish and not changing that bad attitude? We are supposed to be the house of therapy, the house of therapy as we learned in our Matthew study. But how can we relieve others' problems when we are constantly focused on our own? Jesus, even being led to the cross, having the worst day ever, his worst day ever, still said to the women in Luke 23, don't worry about me. Don't worry about you. Worry about your children. Don't weep for me. Weep for yourselves. Weep for your children. Even on his worst day ever, he's still just been beaten. He's getting led to be killed, and he's still thinking of others. Don't think about me. Think about yourselves. If we aren't helping each other, how can we help the world? He said that for the 10th time now. I know. Now, I did say that being a leader, an influencer, a servant, being a Christian is not about evangelizing. Matthew 28, Mark 16. But if we don't evangelize, I don't mean not at all. I'm saying we can't focus on only evangelizing. But if we don't evangelize and take advantage of opportunities, we aren't serving God or serving others, and therefore are not serving God. 1 John chapter 3, verse 17. 1 John chapter 3, verse 17. But whoso hath this world's goods, and seeth his brother hath need, and shutteth up his bowels of compassion from him, how dwelleth the love of God in him? This is physical. You have the world's goods. But this also comes to us spiritually. We have the Bible. We have this. We have this guide in life. We are the most blessed people on earth, and if we hold this from people, How can we say that we have the love of God in us? Reese is always bringing up the construction sites and how people that we work, and those people that we work around, people that obviously need God in our lives, but if he never talks to them or finds an opportunity to show that light, show that example, how is that being a servant to your fellow man? It's the same thing with you women at the bank. Or even me doing whatever I do. Depends on the day. If we never take the opportunity to talk with these people, how are we serving them? We can't be like the priest or the Levite. Well, it's not the right time. I don't want to associate with them. Well, if I do, it's going to make work awkward, and I don't want that. Don't want to be uncomfortable. I got fired from a job once because I stood up for the Bible. We can't worry about losing our worldly relationships. We can't worry about making our worldly job uncomfortable. When these people are going to lose their spiritual lives. But our opportunity of evangelism doesn't just stop at work. What do we look like when we're pumping gas, when we're walking in a store, when we're driving in the car? Do we have road rage? What is the world seeing of us? Again, don't get focused on the outside. We need to be thinking about right here. Don't get just focused on the world. Think about right here. Like Micah said, and it's true, we are Bible quoting and Bible toting people. But if we are not following it, and we are being that boss, that Incredibles boss, doing it only out of obligation, we will turn people away. Not only heathen. It's not just the heathen that call us hypocrites. It's brethren. It's also brethren that have left the church because of our actions, not our actions, the church's actions and attitudes not lining up with what we are teaching. It's not enough to just know it and quote scripture, which I know we all can do here. It doesn't matter if you aren't actively applying it to your life. People can see it. They can see when you're being genuine. They can see when you're not. You're not following what you preach. And then you will have no chance of serving others and therefore no chance of serving God. So I had you write down those notes earlier. But the person you greatly admire, and under that I had you write the reason why you admire them. Most of the time, statistically, the person you admire, the reason you admire them is because of something positive about their attitude. Now, I don't know if your cards turned out this way. I know that mine did when I did it. I know that that's what. Well, I did the person. I did the reason why. I think I literally said because they're positive. Most of the time, statistically, that's why people choose that, because of their attitude. Do people think about you that way? Did people pick you? Well, we all did it. Did somebody pick you? Do you think they should have picked you? Now, I'm not talking about false humility. No, they shouldn't have. No false humility. It's like, no, they should. If people are seeing this, if you are doing this, they should see it. And they should pick you. I picked myself. I'm just kidding. Then I had you write down a few negative qualities about yourself. I really hope you were honest with this list. I know some of you thought that you were going to give it to me, so you might hold back. Oh, I just go to McDonald's too much. I hope that you were honest with your list, because if you can see these negative things about yourself, more than likely others can see it too. More importantly, God can see them. These lists are for you to look at, and these are things for you to work on. Me too. I did it too. It's in my Bible. Are the negative things you wrote down affecting your ability to serve others? Are they affecting your relationship with others? Are they stopping people from coming through the door? Here or there? At home? Is this affecting brethren from coming around and forming relationships with you? Again, do we do this because the law requires us to, or because we have the heart of a servant? Are we serving sin, or are we serving God? Remember the midwives, whose whole life revolves around taking care of mothers and their babies. Doesn't matter what time of day or what's going on. Even if they are not feeling good, they will drop everything to serve a mother and their family in their time of need. Are these women who are not Christians outdoing us? Do I just look at them and go, wow, they're great? Or do I take it home and try to copy these attitudes and do it too? Do I watch them and go, wow, look at them take care of Bryn? And then go home while Bryn is still recovering and not take care of her? Wow, look at, she can barely walk and they're helping her walk. And then we go home, can you help me walk? No. Getting your napkin? It's the same thing as us as Christian servants. Do we look at the people we admire, whether that's on the card or the Good Samaritan, Jesus washing feet, and say, wow, what a great person, but then are not applying these good attributes to our life? Are we letting the world outdo us? We are Christians. We should be the ones shining that light, and it's getting brighter and brighter, and no one can compete with us because we are so good at what we're doing, serving others. It starts right here. It starts at home. It starts with me. It starts with you. It starts with our families, our church family, then the world. We can't serve the world if we are not willing to serve each other, those here in this room. We don't need sour faces. We don't need bad moods. We don't need negative thoughts all the time. Why? Because just like Abraham Lincoln, the President of the United States, refused to have someone with a bad mood and bad face bring him down. Refused to have him. Also, our brethren don't want to be brought down by our bad attitudes. Are we the person someone doesn't want to be around all the time? I wonder if that guy ever heard what Abraham Lincoln said about him. I wonder if he did he change his face? Did he change his attitudes? Or did he think, his opinion's not even worth $5 or a penny? 1 Corinthians 9:27. But I keep under my body and bring it into subjection, lest that by any means, when I have preached to others, I myself should be a castaway. Becoming a doula, a midwife, takes training. Just like this, having a servant attitude needs to be worked on, and it needs dedication. Let's go over the definition of our secular definition of doula. What is a doula? It's a person trained to provide advice, information, emotional support, and physical comfort to a mother before, during, and just after childbirth. This is basically the definition of a Christian. Take away just mothers and apply it to everyone and add in spiritual support. We are to provide biblical advice, biblical information, emotional and spiritual support, and physical comfort to each other. If you are being a servant, then everything else will line up. Are you having marital problems? Spats? Are your kids acting up? Are you having problems with brethren? If everyone is serving each other, then none of this would happen. We need to work on this daily and keep our attitude under subjection so that we can serve each other and not become a castaway. This is a group effort. Philippians chapter 2, verse 2. I think I pull this one up every sermon. I love this verse. Fulfill ye my joy, that ye be like-minded, having the same love, being of one accord, of one mind. Continuing on. Let nothing be done through strife or vainglory, but in lowliness of mind, let each esteem other better than themselves. Look not every man on his own things, but every man also on the things of others. We all have to be a part of the serving. We can't have that thought, well, I'm not going to do it. I'm just going to let Micah do it. We can't keep looking for others to do the serving. It's not on Jordan to do it for his family. It's not on Reese to do it for his family. It's not on Micah to do it for his family or the whole church. It's on us individuals. Micah's not always going to be here, as he told us in Bible class. He's going to die. Micah's not always going to be here. Jordan's not always going to be here. Reese isn't always going to be here. We individually need to step up and take responsibility for our attitudes towards servanthood. Because this is what we signed up for. There was a woman that went in for a job, and after a week of working, she was getting weary of her duties. When she went in for her employee evaluation, they asked her what she thought of her job and what they could do to help improve her performance. One of her complaints out of many was that every time she was at work, customers kept coming up to her and asking for her to get them their lunch, for their dinner, or to fill up a drink for them, and she was getting tired of it. After hearing the woman's complaints, her bosses had a very confused look on their face. Wondering what the looks were about, the woman asked, "Why the confused looks?" The reply from her bosses was a question. "Did you know that you were applying to be a waitress when you came in for the job?" In the very same way, do we understand when we are making the great confession and repenting of all bad habits, starting good ones, and after taking that watery plunge, do we understand that we are becoming servants of one another? We signed up for this. Are we making good on our promises to God? Our brethren need our support. Are we cheating them out of their Christian blessing by not serving them the way God set up the brotherhood to work? Galatians 5:13. For brethren, you've been called unto liberty. Only use not liberty for an occasion to the flesh, but by love serve one another. For all the law is fulfilled in one word, even in this, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Well, what if we don't do it? Verse 15. But if ye bite and devour one another, take heed that ye be not consumed one of another. Matthew chapter 20, verse 25. This is it. We're coming down to the end. But Jesus called them to himself and said, You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who are great exercise authority over them. Yet it shall not be so among you. But whosoever desires to become great among you, let him be your servant. And whosoever desires to be the first among you, let him be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. Are we ready for this new year? Are we ready to do better than we did last year? Today. It's perfectly set up for us, you know. Tomorrow is a new day, it's a new week, it's a new month, it's a new year, and it's all starting on a Monday. Let's not mess this up. We need to make this attitude decision. The last thing I'll say is, to start off the year right, to show you that I mean what I've said, I'm going to wash all your feet today. Just kidding. That's it.